I think it's best to look at this from an external internal point of view. So by examining the external aspect first, you have to look at what data you critically hold within that company, what value it might be to an external party, and what paths they might choose to try and access or exfiltrate that data from you. Now, there are many ways to approach the external angle. Firstly, I think you've got to know your enemy. So you have to understand from an intelligence perspective who it might be that could be looking at your data. I think up until recently, we all thought of data breaches or hacks in terms of financial data, in terms of getting account details, the banks, etc., robbing a bank, getting credit card details, something that could be simply monetized. But the cybercrime industry has really evolved in recent years. It's more about the data, it's more about information. Information is now more valuable than credit card data. Anything, especially information that can be used to drive markets. So mergers and acquisitions information, you know, this kind of data that will move markets. If that's known in advance to the attackers, they can profit enormously from that data, and they can also be removed from the actual crime because you know, they can profit in ways that doesn't really connect them to the data breach. So companies, when they look at the external risks, they really have to be aware of what they've got. They have to have a good inventory. They have to know what data they possess at rest within the company and how well that's protected. And they have to, you know, engage in some kind of testing of their boundaries as well. So for us, we would recommend that they have penetration testing. In other words, testing their actual full inventory of systems that are facing the internet, and also to do what we call red team testing. Now, red team testing is where you're basically engaged to play a bad guy, to play a hacker. And you're given limited information about the company, and limited people within the organization know that you're going to be attacking. So you're given authority at, say, maybe a council level, a legal council level, and then you proceed to look at ways in which you can attack the company. Now, by doing it, by limiting the information to just a select few within the company, this not only tests the perimeter of a company to test the defenses, but it also defenses the frontline people who wouldn't be aware that they're being tested. And if the red team does manage to get in, it tests their responses. It tests, because it's, to them it should appear to be a real incident if they detect it. And it tests the way that they mitigate this, the way that they report this, the way they escalate it, and the way that they ultimately handle it in terms of collecting evidence of the incident. And it's an extremely good way and extremely effective way of testing the incident preparedness or you know, breach preparedness of an organization. So that's the external factor. Then you have to look at the internal factor, which is the insider threat, the insider risk to a company. Increasingly, we're seeing that the most damaging breaches come from the inside, and they're very hard to pick up, very hard to detect, and extremely difficult to mitigate and deal with afterwards, the aftermath. You only have to look at the incidents coming from the US, say the Snowden type cases, where whistleblower type cases, where data has been stolen that's incredibly damaging. Because let's face it, the insider knows not only where the valuable data is, but they also have access to it, and they also may have worked out ways to exfiltrate it. And generally, if it is an employee who is deliberately involved, then they have motivations such as they may be, you know, whistleblower types, or they may be in it financially, or they may be leaving to join a competitor, and they may realize that that would be extremely valuable to the competitor. So there's a lot of things to think of in terms of understanding the inside risk as well. And there's two different approaches to how you deal with those. For the insider, you would be wanting to enhance your monitoring. And that doesn't just include the monitoring of systems that are used by employees, although commonly larger organizations now are looking at endpoint protection. They're looking at monitoring what activity takes place on the computers belonging to employees. Because some companies are even extending that further now to looking at the psychological behavior of employees, looking for risks before they occur. Because in this way, you know, they're able to prevent bad things happening. By just monitoring endpoints, you may pick up that some data has been stolen, something has happened, but that's afterwards. So in other words, the theft has already taken place. So increasingly, companies are trying to predict the behavior of employees now and trying to see who may be most likely to take data and or cause damage to a company and intervene before it actually happens.